worst game I can't stop playing. We got a VTuber here. Here we go.
Is a gambling simulator with a video game attached to it. In this title, you play as the Wanderer.
Of course you
not
can't
that
stop
one,
playing.
who finds
It's
himself
a
stranded
gambling
in a world
simulator. You
ravaged
just
by the
solved your own
intense
problem.
radioactive fallout caused by the mishandling of Obamium. However, instead
Yeah,
of the cool
Obama caused
nuclear
it.
apocalypse where Elvis Presley gives us his cyborg dog, instead we get bootleg Borderlands characters and angry geometry.
Then why can't you stop playing this?
This role-playing game is also quite possibly massively multiplayer. Not like I would know, because the last time there were more than 10 players
Why can't
in
you
one
stop
slot,
playing it?
the servers died. So join me on a brief adventure as I tell you about the zany world of Tower of Fantasy, and why you should never play this game.
I'm highly interested. This game supposedly, is it really that bad? It's a gambling simulator, and it's bad.
If Genshin Impact is the game that opened the gates to Gacha Hell, then Tower of Fantasy is the one that handed me my passport and
I mean,
congratulated me on
let's
my
be honest.
citizenship. For
Genshin
those of you
Impact
who don't
is
know what a
Gacha Hell.
Game is, imagine a casino, except the only prizes are anime JPEGs.
Yeah, baby!
I'm not exaggerating.
$2,500?
Predatory business model in the entire gaming
What are you
industry,
doing?
and therefore
What-
playing
like,
these
what
games
are you
my
doing?
Guilty pleasure and personal vice.
Why would you
I'm going to be
buy
honest
an
with you.
anime
This
waifu
game
for
could be considered
$2,500
by
in a
many
video game?
metrics not good. Its elemental system is laughably simplistic. The character design is at times generic or forgettable. The story is mediocre at best and pure nonsense at worst.
Who runs like that?
Yeah, who runs like that?
The music is generally boilerplate. The boss fights are miserable, and yet for
Of course.
some reason, I keep playing it.
Yeah, why?
I'm hoping
why
that
do
by
you
the
keep-
end of this video, I'll finally understand why. I will be getting into spoilers, but don't worry, you're not missing out because
I'm confused already.
Tower Fantasy innovates by being the first game to tell its most important lore and story details exclusively through loading screen tips. In fact, the
Are you
story is
serious?
so bad that developers let you skip all dialogue and cutscenes. You may notice that the opening cutscene for this game seems like a complete rip-off of Genshin. That's because it is. Here, you select between two of the worst character designs I've ever seen in a gacha game. But that's okay, because in about 5 minutes, you'll get into the character creator and we'll be
Don't
able
worry,
to
you
choose
always choose the
literally
girl
anything
mace.
else. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if the design is bad on purpose to get you to interact with the character creator. Since you're given total freedom to make whatever character you want, that means there are no wrong choices, right? Trick question. The correct answer is the small female character model. No matter what option you choose, your character will shrink down and use the same animations as the small female character model in cutscenes. Sorry bro, it's a canon event. So after you choose your
It's a
gender, your
canon
character gets
event.
wrecked and someone shows up only to wipe your memory for literally no reason and then leave you for dead. This is basically never followed up on, nor does it really seem to be
Skip.
Where Tower of Fantasy lacks in story, its environments
Okay.
make up for in immaculate vibes. Version 2.0 introduced Vera, a desert
I
region
mean-
under threat from extra-dimensional abominations only known as gray space
Like,
entities. The
Soul
desert
Hacker
itself,
2
while
had
nothing
amazing
terribly
vibes.
special on its own,
That game was not
is
the
a
best.
noticeable step up in quality from the starter region of Vesperia. However, where Tower of Fantasy really starts to shine is when it turns into Cyberpunk 3077. Wake up,
3077.
samurai. We've got gacha to roll. You see, in Vera, 98% of the population live inside of the Rhombus. This Evangelion Ramiel-looking dingus is an entire city crammed full of minigames and virtual attractions. It's even got a functioning nightclub. What is the dog doing? The first part of the city is somewhat Chinese.
What is the dog
and the second
doing?
half is very Chinese. It
Of
almost makes
course.
me wish a dystopian megacity
Wow,
in mainland
Chinese,
China
huh?
was real. At first, it struck me as a little odd that a city that is under constant attack was so jam-packed with entertainment venues and luxury apartments. But then it occurred to me that the entire city is basically one giant COVID lockdown bubble. The next area is the Confounding Abyss.
Metro
and it's
into
where
this
I
game.
personally felt that Tower Fantasy's environmental design was starting to become decent. the harsh alien landscape serving as the natural habitat of eldritch horrors.
What am I
really sold
looking
me
at?
on this
Why
game
does
being
every
more than just
person
a generic anime MMO.
strange?
It is also one of the few parts of the game that has a story that is, dare I say it, actually kind of good. It centers around one of the only characters in this game to have interesting writing, Dr. Rubilia, my beloved. The verticality and disconnected terrain really leverage this game's high mobility, which is something I'll touch on later. Next is
you
a
got
toxic
gliding,
swamp biome.
because it's a
This area
Genshin
was basically
ripoff.
just filler added to serve as build-up for the next area. Speaking of which, down through the tunnel we gain access to the Grand Sea, and with it, the ability to dive and freely swim underwater. The underwater city of Inars is absolutely stunning. And even if the swimming mechanics are clunky, the entire region is anything but forgettable. I'd also like to take the time to point out that this entire map is completely seamless between all three of its layers, and it was released on the global version of this game before Genshin Impact even announced that Fontaine would have underwater exploration. The latest expansion to the game added Domain 9, an alternate dimension full of floating islands and an
How
endless
are they
sky.
making it? Oh my
Here,
goodness,
the
this game has a
traditional
little
Chinese
freaking
design
pixie
elements are
fairy
worn on
thing
a sleeve,
too.
and it is positively gorgeous.
How are
However,
they
I
making
can't help
these
be
open worlds
underwhelmed
so
by its
fast?
gameplay, the reasons for which I can't explain unless we get into.
Okay, here we go.
Earlier I mentioned that Tower of Fantasy has a high level of player mobility.
Okay.
This cannot be overstated. In your base movement alone, you have the ability to scale walls a la Breath of the Wild, a double jump, and 3 dodges that are separate from your stamina. The game's tutorial gives you a jetpack, which is basically the paraglider, but you can use it to boost upward. Oh, and by the way, upgrading the jetpack one time removes its stamina consumption, so you can glide almost indefinitely. You can chain the jetpack with your dodges to cover huge horizontal distances as well. While you can swim, there's no need to, because the game also gives you a hoverboard that has no cooldown while you're on the water. Shortly after that, you get a motorcycle, and not too much longer after that, you can kill a world boss that gives you the resources to unlock a grappling hook. This isn't even mentioning the characters that have additional movement
That is so
mechanics
many
like Cloud's
movement.
Umbrella or Rubilia's wing boost. All of this means that compared to Genshin Impact, you may as well be a
Oh yeah, you
pilot
can just
from
walk up
Titanfall
walls.
2.
Sure.
This is both incredibly fun and also a double-edged sword. It's fun in that you can rush across the map at high velocity and combo the various mobility options to rapidly overcome virtually any obstacle. However, this has the side effect of making the exploration trivial and at times extremely boring. A large amount of it is just go to location and grab the thing. This isn't to say that Genshin's exploration isn't also like this at times. However, in Genshin, you can tell the developers have designed the map using these rewards as breadcrumbs to guide you throughout the terrain and constantly recontextualize the various puzzles.
I disagree.
However,
Genshin
in Tower of
Impact's
Fantasy, because you can zip around like a
exploration
fly
is
on
not the
Adderall,
best.
there is basically no difficulty to the vast
It's
majority
slow,
of exploration puzzles, making them little more than a glorified
boring.
checklist. A lot of the other puzzles
But
just
Genshin
boil
was
down
pretty
to
much a glorified
use
checklist,
tool
too.
X on thing Y.
That's right. It goes in the square hole.
Yes.
The underwater exploration in Inars, while it does reuse a lot of the same exploration puzzles, at least has the novelty of the swimming mechanics to make up for it. The vast majority of Domain 9, however, is just gathering various orbs scattered throughout the map.
No.
That's so many.
And the remainder is either opening treasure chests or solving laughably simple puzzles.
Well, everyone gotta have the laughably simple puzzles because people think they're stupid.
It's for this reason why I'm disappointed in Domain 9, because it doesn't really do anything radically different from the rest of the game, like how Inars was such a huge departure from anything else we've seen in the game. I'm going to be real with you though, the exploration is not the reason why I keep coming back to this game.
Oh yeah?
For that, we need to examine... By far, Tower of Fantasy's strongest suit is its combat. The basic gameplay loop is simple, but immensely satisfying. You can equip up to 3 weapons, each of which have a skill that you can use in addition to its attack combos. Attacking with your weapon charges your offhand weapons, and once they finish charging, you fire off their ultimate by swapping to that weapon. This can range
I'm gonna
from
be
a
honest,
massive
I've never heard
AoE
this game
attack
before.
to a team-wide healing pulse. Alongside this,
I really
you can equip
never-
2 different relics, which are pieces of equipment with their own abilities you can trigger in combat.
It doesn't
These
look
can
like
range
something I
from
would
calling
like.
in a mech suit to auxiliary guns,
But,
and even Zhongli's pillar.
You
from
know, I
Genshin
have to
Impact.
admit, it
Except you
doesn't
fire
seem like it
out
would
of
be
a
the
gun.
worst thing in the
Of
whole
course,
world.
The main ones you'll wind up using are the ones that just give your team a
But there
DPS
has to be
spot.
some kind
Or
of
at least
catch.
there are a
Like,
bunch
is
of
it like
fun options to mess
outrageously
around with,
expensive or something
even though the
stupid
combat often
with
boils down to
gotchas, or
repeating
it's
the same
infested with
optimized
so
combo
much
loop you figured out
crap
weeks
that you don't
ago?
want to do
Its
anything with it?
fast-paced nature and constant weapon swapping still manages to get my dopamine receptors to fire off like the chimpanzee that I am. Even if it lacks the depth of Genshin's elemental system, or the tight team coordination of Final Fantasy XIV, if the combat wasn't fun, there's no way I would have stuck around for as long as I have. The second reason is
They're giant
if
numbers.
there's one thing Tower Fantasy has managed to consistently nail over the past
What?
6 months, it's their quality of life updates, whether it's additional teleport waypoints to frequently visited locations, or an overhaul of the raid system to allow for easier matchmaking. I cannot overstate just how much of a difference these changes have made for the overall game experience. Quick Battle, my beloved. It maintains confidence that the game will
Everyone
only
loves
continue
quick battle
to
in any
improve,
video game.
even if it can be 2 steps forward, 1 step back at times. Compared to the highly
Okay.
polished experience Genshin provides, Tower Fantasy is really janky, but consider that unlike
Does
Genshin,
look
2F lets you play
Genshin.
the game at a frame rate higher than 60, and also lets
My
you
boy.
pet the dog. There is undoubtedly still a lot of jank in this game, but for the most part, it's the kind that is endearing rather than frustrating or game-breaking. Whether it's wonky cutscene animations or hilarious physics glitches, you're sure to encounter at least a few bugs while playing this game. Although they're
You
patched
mean,
now,
like,
some of my
500 of
favorites
them?
in the past year include the old grapple hook slingshot bug, and the time you could cheese a world boss by yoinking her off of a cliff.
Oh,
There she goes.
it's just
Is not just the way that they've improved the quality of life over the previous versions of the game, but also over its competition, where Tower Fantasy really hits hard. I lightly
Hey,
touched on it
jank
earlier,
is
but
good.
one of the flagship features of this game is its character customization. The character creator is so robust that players use it to do in-game cosplay. From facial markings, accessories, and even dyeing your clothing, there's an ever-expanding pool of cosmetics that can be used to make the perfect drip for your character.
Let me
In
guess, you have to
addition,
buy 'em.
Tower Fantasy does an excellent job of separating gameplay and cosmetics.
Oh?
On that topic, things get a little more complicated because we first need to discuss
okay. Let's see how the gotcha's different. This is what I was
in this
waiting
game,
for.
You technically don't pull for the characters. You pull for their weapon instead. However, once you unlock their weapon, you unlock that character as a skin. This means that you can have the gameplay of a character without having to take on their appearance. This is particularly appealing for people who want to use a character's kit without having to become an anime twink. You can use any character's skin with
True,
any
I don't.
weapon.
No
Or
one. I don't want to be
you
an
could
anime twink.
not use their skin at all, and choose to continue playing your custom character. This freedom with your character's appearance goes a long way. Characters
pretty
you've
cool.
unlocked are more than just skins.
That's a good
though.
idea. Every
Once you
game should
simp
have
enough
that.
for them using gift items, they'll start DMing you. These messages are put in the same section where DMs from
The AI gotcha characters DM you in the video game? No wonder it's popular. You got the anime girls writing to you. Any man's gonna fall for this. This is a trap.
actual
This is
other
a trap.
players show up. It would be funny if it weren't also kind of sad.
It is
While this
sad.
feature is executed better in Honkai Star Rail, Tower Fantasy did do it first. Another nice feature is that if you pull 4 copies of a character, you unlock an alternate skin for that character and their weapon. For those of you who are familiar with Genshin, this means that the alt skin unlocks at C3. While this does add additional pressure to pull on banners, overall I'd say that it's a net positive, although I am just a little biased. Part of this is because of how the pity system in the in-game shop works. In Tower Fantasy, you always get a 50-50 pity on your 80th pull on a banner. Compared
80th?
to Genshin's variable pity capped off at 90 rolls. Pity in Tower Fantasy is always 50-50, but each pull also gives you a token, and 120 tokens allow you to buy a copy of the featured character from the shop. This means that the hard guarantee for a character is 110 pulls. compared to Genshin's 180. On top of
110.
this, if the character you pulled is on the standard banner, you can buy an extra copy of them from the shop at any time. Since the dailies for this game give you one standard pull per day, you can slowly upgrade all of your standard characters over time, meaning if you stay dedicated, you can eventually get all of them maxed out. I cannot stress how much I wish this system was in Genshin. However, this does come at a cost.
Hold on. You get standard characters upgrade for free? That's amazing. That's actually a really good idea. And you only have to pay for the premium ones. That's really cool. What, the standard characters are Garbo?
One thing I discovered very early on into playing this game was the stark power difference between the different tiers of weapons. The SR characters in this game, equivalent to Genshin's 4 stars, are basically worthless compared to the SSRs. And on top of that, despite the fact that newer characters in Global are usually quite heavily nerfed compared to the Chinese version of the game, all of the new SSRs wind up outclassing the previous ones. That's not to say the standard SSRs are bad, so much as the limited SSRs are just that much better. Sure, they occasionally move older limited SSRs to the standard banner, and they have buffed older SSRs, but the newer characters almost always wind up power creeping the old ones. This makes the game essentially pay to win, and while in practice you can still experience basically everything this game has to offer as a free-to-play, you will always be outperformed by people who spend money on the game to a rather absurd degree. It may be significantly cheaper to max out a limited character in Tower of Fantasy compared to Genshin, but that doesn't matter when you're forced to continually max out new characters in order to keep up with other players. In addition to the power creep pressuring you into spending more on the game, there are a number of other additional psychological tricks the game has that
but you don't need to beat all the
Genshin.
levels, so who cares?
Dark patterns are much more obviously integrated into the game's UI and overall design, making it much more manipulative and predatory.
Yep, sounds about right. It's a gacha game.
Being an MMO, this game is built from the ground up for multiplayer.
No!
Got him. There are world bosses, instance dungeons, weekly raids, and a bunch of other activities you can do with your friends and your clan.
I have to switch. Oh, will it not let me switch?
Hey, Liv.
You even get bonus currency for helping out new or returning players. Tower Fantasy is the only game where you can type in global chat that you've got blue balls, and that gets people to join your squad. Just don't get too many people fighting the same world boss, or the server will crap itself. While the vast majority of this game is PvE, there are a few PvP modes. We don't talk about them. However, for some reason, Hota thinks that forcing PvP minigames on people for their events is a good idea. This means that
the worst content is time limited.
In complete opposition to Genshin, Tower Fantasy's time-limited events are a complete joke. In order to get the rewards, you'll often have to subject yourself to frustrating minigames, or queue your character through hours of AFK farming. While some of these aren't inherently unfun, the amount of times you have to run them and the gap in rewards between the winners and the losers makes them draining at best. Some of these minigames also gain nothing by being PvP, and I'd even argue it actively detracts from the experience for a number of them. It's one of the few times I've been glad that content has been temporary, which I think says a lot. Babe, it's 4 p.m, time for another Fall Guys ripoff. At least the rewards are generally worth pursuing, and in that aspect TOF is quite generous. According to the stats page that was available during the game's 6-month anniversary, I had received the equivalent of 733 event pulls for free. Of course, you do have to keep in mind that these free pulls don't mean nearly as much as the free pulls Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail give out due to power creep. What fascinates me is that Tower Fantasy as a game is carried almost completely by excelling in the few areas that Genshin comes up lacking, namely the character customization and proper multiplayer content. I certainly didn't anticipate sinking over 400 hours into this game, but since it's relatively easy to keep up with new content, I find that I never really want to fully drop out from playing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't play this. It would be too addicting.
And reflect on how I got to this point. The massive player dog piles, the high mobility, the squads of players zipping around on motorcycles and wing gliders. Some faint memories start coming back to me. The year is 2014.
Okay.
I sat down in front of the family computer after a long day at high school. I load up Skype, I start up Steam, and then my friends and I all start playing a little game called Firefall, a now long-dead sci-fi MMO that died all too soon. The high mobility, the mounts, the massive fights that brought together a couple dozen players as we fought bosses, pushed back enemy invasions, or just mined for resources. I realized Tower Fantasy accidentally managed to hit a forgotten vein of nostalgia in me. An itch I didn't even know I had got scratched by this game, and in a warped, corrupted way, this game is the closest thing I have to a spiritual successor.
Are you sure about that?
Timeline, Firefall managed to succeed and have a dedicated player base keeping it up and running. Perhaps in that version of events, I could have ignored Tower Fantasy and kept dropping thumpers and fighting melding tornadoes. I guess, having realized this, I now finally know why Tower Fantasy is the worst game I can't stop playing.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. Yeah, it's not a game for me, though. I won't play it on stream. I'm not gonna. But for real, though, I think it does have benefits over Genshin, but I hate power creep so much that, like, it even bothers Pokemon for me. So, yeah, I'm not gonna play that. But I do think it's interesting.